Faria is Brachot 6b. I put the link in the chat if you want to pull it up. This is page 6b of the Talmud, and in the Faria online, it's paragraph number 26. That's where I want to pick up. It also is where we left off last time, but it's also a logical place to continue. So, the blessing for Torah study is Baruch atah Eloheinu melech haolam she'ekshanu v'yisrael v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. And where we were was talking about a number of different angles on prayer and things like this. But what's important now is that they're going to pick up just with the series, as you know, they frequently will do things stream of consciousness style and just throw in a bunch of quotes from the same rabbi, again and again. So so where we are now is quotes that Rabbi Chelbo said that Rav Huna said. So this is just a series of quotes from him, or from that line. Citations are very, very important. Saying where you got your knowledge from is very important. So there's a little profile of Rabbi Chelbo on the next page. A third generation Babylonian Amora, which means that he lives 3 generations after the time of that the Mishnah was written. He's living in Babylon, what's now Iraq. Went somewhat back and forth with between Babylon and the land of Israel. Commuted. So this is what he brings. Rabbi Chelbo, Rav Huna. Let me Adam Zahir b'tfilat mincha. Sorry, Eliyahu. Lo na'ana ela b'tfilat mincha. Shenamar v'hiba lo mincha v'yagesh Eliyahu anavi v'yomer v'gomer. Neni Adonai Neni. So Rabbi Chelbo says that Rab Huna said, that's the sages passing along this knowledge, one must always be vigilant with regard to the afternoon prayer, to mincha. Make sure you say mincha, right? Why is this? Because Elijah was only answered when he prayed in the afternoon. How do we know this? Because in the at the great scene on Mount Carmel in Haifa, when Elijah is facing down with the prophets of Baal, right? Jezebel has, arranged for all of her husband, have arranged for all of the prophets of Baal to serve them, and they're leading Israel, and they're doing these terrible idolatrous things. And Elijah comes in and challenges the prophets of Baal to a sacrifice off. Whoever is God brings fire from heaven and swallows the sacrifices, then we'll know that person is right. And Elijah, wins and then slaughters all of the other guys. But that happened in the afternoon. Because it says that it happened in the afternoon, that he prayed and says, God, answer me, and Elijah was answered. So look, you know what we know about noon, about afternoon prayer? God answers, right? If you want to ask what time is good for God, when's God really going to listen to you, answer afternoon prayers. How do we know this? Elijah got answered. So this is a little piece of advice. They're going to now pick up on one strange thing. Now that we're talking about Elijah, we're talking about a strange thing about that scene. Elijah says, "Aneni, Hashem, aneni, answer me, God, answer me." So, wait a minute. If God is so good at answering at mincha, the afternoon prayer, why does he have to say Aneni Hashem Aneni? Why does he have to say answer me, God, answer me? He has to say answer me twice. If God's really listening, shouldn't he just have to say it once, right? So what does it mean? Aneni. Shtared eish mina shemayim. Va'aneni. Shelo yamru ma'aseh kaspim hem. He said, answer me twice. Why? The first answer me was asking that fire come down from the heavens, then consume the sacrifice so everyone would know. And the second answer me was that everyone would, that no one would say, it's just a trick. So two answer me's. Why? Because there are two aspects to it. One, that there's a miracle. Two, that no one's like, it's just a trick. It's just done by magicians. So that's why you had to say it twice. So now we have our answer. What's the most important service of the day? Mincha, the afternoon service. But as long as we're talking about prayer services. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Af Tfilat Arvit, Shana Amar, Tachon Tfilati, Koteret Lefnecha, Et Cafe Mincha Erev. You know what? Ma'ariv, the evening prayer, Arvit, is really important too, because it says in the Psalms that my prayer come forth as incense before you, lifting my hands as the evening offering, right? It says that the evening offering is especially important, so praying in the evening must be especially important. So you say that the afternoon service is important, the evening service is important too. I'll let you guess what they're going to say next. Yes. Turns out Rav Nachman by Yitzchak Amar, after Tfilat Shacharit, Shenetmar, Adonai Boker Tishma Koli, Boker Recha Lach Etzpaneh. Rav Nachman by Yitzchak said, also with Shacharit, the morning prayer, because it says, Psalm 5, Adonai, in the morning you shall hear my voice, in the morning I will order my prayer to you and will look forward. Look expectantly. So when does God listen? Shacharit Mincha Mariv. You sort of knew as soon as I say one's most important, you know that they're like parents with kids. They love them all the same. You knew that they were going to do all three are important. So they start out with Mincha, but they end up hitting them all. So that's a little detour into the importance of praying 3 times a day. Now, back to the quotes. We're just doing quotes from Rabbi Chelbo saying in the name of his teacher, Rav Huna. So, Amar Rabbi Chelbo, Amar Rav Huna, is the bottom of page 37. This is, if you're looking in the Sfaria, it's paragraph 29. Kol ananeh misudat chatan ve'enu mismacho over b'chamisha kolot shene'amar kol sason v'kol simcha kol chatan v'kol kala kol omrim v'hodu et Adonai tzavot. Rabbi Chelbo says that Rav Huna says, anyone who benefits from the feast of a groom, which is to say, you go to a wedding and you eat, right? But you do not cause the groom to rejoice. You don't make him happy. You violate 5 voices. Over. So the mitzvah is, if you're at a wedding, you're supposed to make the couple happy. Here he's saying that if you go to the wedding and you don't actively make the groom rejoice, you violate 5 voices. What are these? We'll get to what those voices are and what this means. But their proof text is this famous line from Jeremiah: Kol sason v'kol simcha, the voice of joy and the voice of gladness. Kol chatan v'kol kala, the voice of the groom and the voice of the bride. Kol amrim hodu Hashem zinod, and the voice of those who say, give thanks to God, for God is good. Odula, night, etc., etc., right? So that line has the word kol, voice, right? So it'll be an important thing. If you don't know it, the word kol, kuf, vav, lamed, means voice sound. So there are 5 voices making. I mean, here they say the groom, but they sort of, it seems they mean the couple, or they're speaking to men, so they assume that maybe they only have access to making the groom happy. But like making people happy on their wedding day is super important. 5 voices are mentioned that are important. The full verse is the voice of joy, the voice of gladness, the voice of the groom, the voice of the bride, the voice of those who say, give thanks to the Lord of hosts, for the Lord is good, for his mercy lasts forever. Even those who bring a thanks offering to the house of the Lord, for I will restore the captivity of the land as it was in the beginning, says the Lord. So there even, notice that Jeremiah compares the joy of the couple on a wedding day to bringing an offering in the temple. Bringing an offering in the temple, super important. So like this is like as important as anything is this. The commentary, these 5 voices in the context of a bride and groom correspond to the 5 voices mentioned in the context of the revelation at Mount Sinai. As in Song of Songs, the day of revelation at Sinai is alluded to by the phrase his wedding day. So we'll get to those voices at Sinai in a moment, but but in that scene that we read on Shavuot, at Mount Sinai, when God reveals the Torah, there are a number of times in that section, Exodus 19:20, where it talks about kolot, either the kolot, the voice of God, or the kolot, it's the same word for thunder. So the voice of God and thunder are the same word, and that's also used 5 times in that section. So 5 times voices, kolot, celebrating wedding, 5 times giving the Torah. This also, and this we alluded to on Sunday night, Shavuot night, the Shavuot is supposed to be like the wedding of God and Israel, right? That this is another one of the links that the rabbis make. Same thing on those kolot, that when the Torah is given, Israel and God get married, right? God's the bridegroom, Israel is the bride. The ketubah is the 10 commandments. The chuppah is the mountain being held over their head, or the clouds of glory over their head. The witnesses are heaven and earth, or the thunder and the lightning, or the sun and the moon. Like so you have witnesses. You have a ketubah. You have a chuppah, and Israel and God get married. And the link again is partly on these 5 voices for the bride and groom, 5 voices at the revelation of the Torah. Top of page 38. So we know it's a sin not to cause the groom to rejoice, or worse in their formulation, to go and eat the food and not cause the groom to rejoice. Top of 38, next paragraph. But if you do cause the groom to rejoice on his wedding day, what's your reward? Like sort of like all right, so we know that you're not supposed to violate it, but is there a reward for this mitzvah? Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Zoche l'Torah shenatna b'chamisha kolot, shenatmar v'hi b'yom shishi b'chayot boker hi kolot v'karim v'anan kvod al har v'kol shofar v'gomer v'hi kol shofar v'gomer Elohim yadenu b'kol. So so if you do cause a groom to rejoice, you are rewarded with Torah, meaning that you will become a vessel for Torah. How do we know that? Because of the 5 voices that are revealed at Mount Sinai, because it says that on the 3rd day, they were camped at the foot of Mount Sinai, when it was morning, there were sounds, kolot, or could be thunder, kolot, which it would be plural, at least 2, and lightning and a thick cloud about the mountain, and the voice, the kol of the shofar. Same word sounding shofar, kol, it's a voice. And the voice, the kol of the shofar grew louder and louder, and God answered him bakolot, again with a voice. So there's 5. Ya'anenu b'kol, answered him with a voice. So 5 times. Ini, Talmud says, really? Is that accurate? Because there weren't just 5 voices at Mount Sinai. Haktiv v'kol ro'im et hakolot. Because it also says right after the 10 Commandments, the whole nation saw the voices. Right? It's not just 5. Afterwards, there were more voices. It says they saw the voices. By the way, this is why the rabbis claim that the revelation at Sinai was a collective experience of synesthesia. Did I say that right? Synesthesia is when people see sounds. So a specific mental condition when these, think of as Oliver Saxe type things that where when there's some people where their minds work when they hear something, they see it. Like, certain voices call certain colors and whatever the case may be, or instruments can call, like, just cause them to see certain things. That's because it's the Torah is supposed to be this, because it says they saw the voice. So the voice normally isn't something that you see, but they did. And that also, by the way, would make 6 voices or more. Response is, Matan kolot matan Torah havu. Those are just the voices we were talking about before, is the Talmud's response. The voices they saw, these aren't fresh voices. These are the ones that we referred to earlier. So they're not, so it's still just 5. That's their answer. Then we're good. Then they zap back to the earlier quote from Jeremiah, where it says that, if you cause a groom to rejoice, and it says, great is giving a thanks offering, and then here they'll make it explicit. Rabbi Abahu Omer ki ilu ikriv Torah, Amar evi Torah vet Hashem. Rabbi Abahu says a reward for causing a groom to rejoice is the same as if one offered a thanks offering in the temple, as it says, those who bring a thanks offering to the house of the Lord. So the again, bring sacrifices, a big deal, making the groom rejoice. I learned from the verse in Jeremiah is equal to that. Part of the continuous rabbinic project, right? Like always trying to find how it is that how do you live when you can't bring sacrifices? That they have, so here they're mining the prophets, mining this line from Jeremiah for equal to bringing sacrifice. God is just as happy if you make people happy on their wedding day. Which is a great thing, right? Like, meaning this, it's a great move on their part, moving something from the realm of ritual in the temple into a very human realm of we used to bring sacrifices to God. Now we put your effort into making brides and grooms happy. It's really sort of like a sweet midrashic maneuver.
Rabbi, did they get into anywhere specifics about how to make the bride and groom happy? I know they tend to get very specific about other things, or is that just left open to interpretation?
They do. They do. Not here. They won't do it here, but they do. Like they do want you to
sing, dance,
and dance,
right?
To like put yourself, like the phrase we use now is to put yourself out there. That you're supposed to go all out and sort of expend your energy and your money making them happy. The most famous instance of this is the debate between the house of Hillel and the house of Shammai. In a section that's called Ketzad Merakdim, how do you dance before the bride? Meaning, they're literally sort of asking, what's the optimal way to like make her happy.
I had a feeling there might be specifics involved. Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Exactly. The fascinating thing about this one is this is where they fall into the argument of what do you say when suddenly you're face to face with the bride and she's ugly, right? Because they're like, that it's the job of everybody. None of this is woke. So let's, zap back to 1800 years ago. It's the job of everybody to tell the bride on her wedding day how beautiful she is. This is part of it. So Hillel and Shammai now have a debate on what do you do if to say it would be a lie? Should you make the bride feel good and lie? Or there's a commandment in the Torah, keep far from a lie. So you're violating a mitzvah if you lie, but also you're not supposed to, make anyone feel bad, much less on their wedding day. So what do you do? Before I answer, because I know their answer. Anyone? It's a great scene, right? Great question.
Well, I think I would always err on the side of not making someone feel badly. I can't back it up with anything other than I know it's an important principle in Judaism. I can't give you a quote, but I guess I'd fall on that side.
Not avoiding the subject and just wishing them much happiness and healthy children.
Right. I'm thinking,
Or write a big check.
Yeah, that too. I'm thinking, when they say, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all.
All brides are beautiful.
Yeah,
right.
That's true. All babies are too.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
So Helen and I have been shopping for some new countertops, and we walked into one place and I liked one and she liked the other. And the guy looked at me, he was Turkish, and he just looked at me. Maybe he reads a different book, Rabbi. And he said, do what she says. Buy what you want.
That's also in the Torah. It's a famous line.
Okay.
God says to Abraham, Shema b'kolah, listen to what Sarah says. Word call again. So so everyone has a version of it. So again, you have a social custom. Everyone says she's beautiful. You have a command from the Torah, don't lie. You have another command that's thought of as being from the Torah, don't embarrass people. So what do you do when these are in conflict with each other, right? Like that's the fun things aren't what the mitzvot are. The fun thing is when the mitzvot contradict each other, how do you prioritize? So Beit Shammai first says, like, look, it says somebody offered this one, like, compliment something else. Say what a beautiful dress it is. Say what a beautiful day it is. Say what you can't lie. It's forbidden to lie. Don't lie. Say something else. Beit Hillel is like, oh, she'll know. If you walk up and say,
yes,
and say beautiful dress, she'll know.
Yeah.
What lovely centerpieces. So you've then violated, you've humiliated somebody, and then on the exact day that like the worst day that you could possibly humiliate someone. So this Beit Hillel says Alan's answer. They say Alan Halpern says first they say, tell her she's beautiful. Beit Shammai is like, you can't lie, and Beit Hillel says every bride is beautiful to her groom. So it does come up to your question, and it leads to one of the great scenes and one of the go-to teaching sort of moments of like for like especially like Hebrew High and things like this of like once we're past, like don't lie, like when is it okay to like play with the truth? When is it okay to shade things this way and that, and that's like the master text on it. Every bride is beautiful. It's a good one. So yes, so yeah, important to make them happy, and that obviously, if you go to a traditional Jewish wedding, they're all out affairs. It is a burst of joy that I rarely see elsewhere. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak Amar. Next guy says, what's the reward? Ki'ilu bana echad mechor banot Yerushalayim shene'amar ki ashiv Yeshivot Krishona Amar Sham. That just quoting from later in the verse, if you cause the groom to rejoice, it says, if you rebuilt one of Jerusalem's ruins, as it says later in the same verse, for I will restore the captivity of the land as it was in the beginning. So rebuilding Jerusalem, bringing a sacrifice, these are big deals. So again, they're transferring the sort of a lot of these religious impulses into like the social contract. Then we zip back to more quotes from the same source, Rabbi Chelbo and Rav Kuna. Rabbi Chelbo Amar Rav Kuna said, Kol adam sheyesh bo yirat shamayim, kavro nishma'in, shenamar, sof davar kol nishma et Elohim v'yarav gomer. Rabbi Chelbo said that Rav Kuna said that any person who has fear of heaven, which is their fear of heaven is their word for like for doing the right thing or feeling as if God's eyes are on you, or like to act in a way that shows that you want God to think well of you, not bad, fear of heaven. Your words are heeded. His words are heeded, as it says. The end of the matter, all having been heard, fear God and keep his commandments, for that is all of man. This is towards the end of Ecclesiastes. He says that after this long book of many cynical, and sort of like biting things, Ecclesiastes ends on a hopeful note that that in the end, just fear God and that's the end of the matter. And they're reading that as because it's written, essentially the idiom in English is when all is said and done, and that's like really, it's like and in Hebrew it's when everything's been heard. They say, well, if you fear God, then everything will be heard. It's probably a tacked on line, meaning that it might be like just Ecclesiastes might be thoroughly cynical, and they had to tack on a hopeful line at the end in order to like have it end on a nice note instead of the typical Ecclesiastes note. Anyway, the point is that fear God and God will listen to you. It's a pious statement. My kiza kol adam. What does it mean when it says that the end of that verse, for that is all of man? Like it says, the line is fear God and keep God's commandments, for that is all of man. Rabbi Elazar Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu Kol Olam Kulo Lo Nivra Ela Bishvil Zeh. For that is all of man, meaning he says that's Kadosh Baruch Hu, that's God on high, saying that it's as if the entire world was created for you, meaning that if you live your life fearing God, then God counts it as if the effort of creating the entire world was worth it just for you. That's their read on it. Then they'll say the same thing in slightly different ways. Rav Avar Bar Kahana Amar Shakol Zeh Keneged Kol Olam Kulo. Or he's saying that it teaches that for this there is spelled differently. That person is worth like essentially the rest of humanity. That the one person who fears God is like counts for the same as all the rest of humanity. That it's such a incredible thing to be, as like on the scales, as it were. Rabbi Shimon ben Azai Omer, Amre le Rabbi Shimon ben Zohar Omer, Kol Olam Kulo Lo Nivra Ela Litzvat Lezeh. Not only is the equivalent to the entire world, but the entire world is created to serve as companions for him. Meaning that if you fear God, everything is sort of like is created for you to enjoy, as it were. Like everything was worth it for you, so everything else is, as it were, like there for you.
Rabbi?
Yep.
The word fear here is used, emphasized quite a bit, in these paragraphs. Is the relationship based on fear? Is it described elsewhere as, if you're picking the carrot and the stick, we have to pick the stick. We can't pick, can you love God? Can you respect God? Can you believe? Does it have to be, or are they using the word fear differently?
Well, yeah, so you both, famously we'll be commanded via Havta, right? You should love your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your being, right? So on some level, like the prominence of the via Havta shows us that they want to drive home that the relationship should be one of love, right? Like the blessing right before it, Ahavat Olam or Ahava Rabbah. First we say, God loves us, and then the next thing is you should love God, right? Though the middle paragraph of the Shema is sort of more based on fear. The first part is supposed to be based on love, and so a bit of both. So there is the carrot and the stick thing. In the Torah, they'll spend much more time on punishments than on rewards. So they'll mention the carrots, but go into greater detail on the stick. Here, and then to your last point, is it shaded of meaning? Yara can be translated a couple of different ways. It can be fear, or it can be awe, A-W-E. So those two are related. And you really could translate either way. If I were doing the translations like in the Siddur when that pops up, I would use awe, because it's a generational thing, right? Like 200 years ago, they responded better to yira as fear. Now, in a free society, people probably respond better to yira as awe. If you're in awe of God, if you live your life in awe of God, of like, oh my gosh, given this level of goodness and compassion in the universe, I should carry myself this way, I should act this way, that I think can hit with people. Fear turns people off.
Yes. Yeah. I was thinking in terms of a parent-child relationship, being analogous, and I'd rather have the child. All would be wonderful, but I'd rather, but love and respect and belief would I'd certainly settle for that, and fear not so much. But like you said, perhaps it was the times.
Yeah, so it's both, and there is a point. Like fear is their backup, meaning that you should do it out of love. But if you're not going to do it out of love,
right? Yeah.
Do it out of fear, which is the way society, of course, works. Like, drive the speed limit out of concern for the safety of you and your fellow motorists. But if you're not going to do it for that reason, do it because you're going to get a ticket.
Right.
So both, of course, is how we operate in society, and they do both too. But generally speaking, whenever you see in the Siddur in the Torah, when you see fear, as more often than not, you can substitute the word awe in, and you'd have an accurate translation.
Thank you.
This is another good one. אמר רבי חלבו אמר רב הונא, כל שיודע בחברו שהוא רגיל ליתן לו שלום, יקדם לו shalom. שנאמר, ביקש שלום ורודפהו. Rabbi Chelbo said, that Rabbi Huna said, one who's aware that another person is accustomed to greet him. You should greet him first. If somebody says hi to you, you have to say hi back. I like this. This is sort of like suddenly being elevated to the status of halakha. If somebody says hi to you, you have to say hi back. And what's more is if somebody's like you saying hi to you, like it's nice not to have them always be the initiator. You should get into the practice of that person clearly like wants to have a relationship with you. You should like say hi. And they get this because hello is of course shalom. And there's a line in the Psalms, Bakesh shalom v'rodfehu, seek shalom and pursue it, which we normally, it's seek peace and pursue it. Here, they're translating, this is a great rabbinic move. They're translating shalom not as peace and some high-minded thing, it's hi. Seek shalom, hellos, greetings, and pursue them. Like this is it's sort of funny for all their heaviness. Here they're sort of encouraging small talk and making sure people feel included and making sure that like people feel that like sort of like just the simple social the social grease of relationships. And they use this high-minded line and famous line and important line, seek peace and pursue it. Not which normally is like, don't just let, peace is not just a value, you're not supposed to let it fall to you, but you're supposed to actively seek it out. Here they bring it home. Well, not all of us are getting, calls from Anthony Blinken or 5 calls from Biden in the last week. Like, like that's like some people get to pursue peace on that level, and other people like say hi to people. It's important. Ve'im, and if natanlo v'lo chazir, and if the other person said hi to you and you didn't return the hi, the hello, nikra gazlan, you're considered a thief, a robber. Gazlan, shene'emar, ata v'atam ikerem gazalta ani be'tachti be'vetechem. It is because there's a quote from Isaiah. It's you have eaten up the vineyard, the spoils of the poor is in your houses. Only it is you who have eaten up the vineyard, the spoils of the poor is in your houses. The commentary is right. What's the spoils of the poor is in your houses? Who's stealing from the poor? The only way to steal from a pauper who owns nothing is to rob him of his dignity by refusing to return his greeting. That's a sometimes you may be in a relationship where you're higher up the social ladder and there's nothing that the other person is capable of giving you. It's an asymmetrical relationship. You've got more money, you've got more status, whatever. So if that person says hi to you and you snub them, you've like taken like the last thing. The only thing that they have is sort of like is this, and you just like made them feel bad even for that. So you're you're a thief. You're a thief if you take somebody's dignity by sort of like making them feel awkward and like purposefully, as it were, not greeting them. The word for answer is ana, and the word for poor is ani. So you've stolen from the poor is like you've stolen the response. Like that's sort of like the that's they're playing on the words there. And also, by the way, that makes it similar. It's also linked to Elijah shouting, "Answer me." But so this is like they're playing on answer is similar to the word for poor person. So again, it's important to say hi to people, and all the more so if there's a social gap there. It's especially important that that you do that because this is because you may get your self-worth because you have stuff, but the other person doesn't. They're helped out by you giving them this. So make sure. So nice little piece there. What is their link to this next one? I'm not. I don't know how they make this leap to this next piece. It may be that we're starting a new thought entirely. We won't get through it today, but it's such a great one that I want to start it because and I'm looking. This is at the top of page 39, and if you're looking in the online, this is page 7, daf 7, Amud A, paragraph 1. So this is 7A1. And it's at top of page 39. So even in the standard edition, this is top of a new page. This means that we've starts on page 2. So we've read all 6 pages back and forth the course of a year. This is a great one. Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishun Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yochanan says that Rabbi Yossi said, from where is it in the Tanakh that we learn that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that God prays? We know that we pray. How do we know that God prays? Or he's taking it as a given. God prays. Where do we get? What's our source for it? Now remember, before God wears tefillin. God wears tefillin. God's davening. So how do we know that God prays? Well, Shnamar, because it says, and what also is a famous line, at Har Kodshi v'samachtim v'tfilati. This famous line in Isaiah. Says, this vision of like the end days, right? Like when everyone recognizes God and gathers. So all nations, he's talking about, I'll bring them to my holy mountain. I'll make them joyful for Beit Tefilati, in the house of my prayer. Tefilatam lo ne'amar ela tefilati. Doesn't say, I will bring them to the house of their prayer. It says, I will bring them to the house of my prayer. Mikan shekadosh baruch hu mitpalel. From this we learn that God prays, because it's not. They're saying that line when God says, "I'll bring them the house of my prayer." The house of prayer isn't that we're praying to God. Saying the temple is the house where God prays. It's the house of my God's prayer. So great insight. God prays. Logical question. My matzle. Home asks the question. So what's God pray? I know what I pray. I know I've got a book, right? I know that I pray, and I know to whom I pray. I pray to God. I got a whole series of prayers I say to God. I know how to do it. So now that you've gone out of your way to establish that God prays, what exactly is God praying, and who exactly is God praying to? What's going on? Marav Zutra Bar Tuvia Marav. Rav Zutra Bar Tuvia said that Rav said. So again, this is a few generations later. Says, what's God's prayer? Hiratzon Melefanai. May it be my will before me, right? Many Jewish prayers begin, may it be your will. God says, may it be my will. Sheka'aso rachme et ka'asi, that my kivusho rachme et ka'asi, that my mercy overcome my anger. Pause there for a second.
Yeah. Does this challenge the omnipotence? Not omnipotence, I'm sorry, the all-powerful
That's omnipotent, yeah.
Because
and omniscience, right? If the
or
theme is-
omniscient, right. Because he needs God, or God needs
Yeah.
help to be able to tame his baser instincts.
so this is the thing. They sort of, yes, yeah. I mean, obviously, like this, it's a they've opened up a real can of worms here. Like, and you feel like they weren't forced into doing it. Like, they could have said, "Oh, when it says Beit Tefillati, the house of my prayer, it means like the house of people praying to me." They didn't have to say the house of my prayer, but they did. So, what's God's prayer? Again, like, why would God pray? Is like sort of is what creates the problem, and then like the prayer. So one, this tells me that the rabbis reading the Torah read the same Torah that we read, which is sort of like flipping through it there. Like at some point in time, somebody like turned to, Rabbi Yochanan turns to Rabbi Yossi and Shul and says, "Man, God does have an anger problem, doesn't he?" Right? Like that moment that like everyone sort of has at some point in time would be like, "Whoa, doesn't take much to set him off, does it?" Like they had that moment too. And what's more is they are chutzpahdik enough to put into God's mouth. God be like, "Yeah,
Rabbi, we always go back and forth to the omniscient and anthropomorphization of God, right? When we like it, we treat him like a human being. He's angry, he's sad, he's nasty, and then we take him up 48 levels. And we go back and forth. That's throughout the Tanakh, right? I mean, we just do that.
It's sort of right.
As it suits us.
Yes. So right, God on some levels, like sometimes God is this like unknowable beyond things like this. Here, I mean, this is as human as it gets. Like not, this is almost more human than like the outstretched arm or whatever it might be. Like this is because there's a whole psychological thing going on here. May it be my will that show that like the literally it's the same word used for capturing, or same form of the word, by the way, in modern Hebrew for the occupation, i.e. of territory. So it's literally that my mercy, same roots, rachme as Rahmanas, or from Rachem, same word for womb, overcome my anger. Yeah, so God here doesn't know the future, as it were, and struggles to keep divine anger in check.
It's almost like he's praying to himself.
It's exactly what's going on. Because it's be my like it's on milfanai. May it be like may it be my will.
But does he pray 3 times a day?
Right. So this feels like we'll get to that. Like this feels like a spontaneous prayer. This feels like a very human prayer that anyone might say. Like we all, in theory, know our negative traits and our positive traits, and may well say some version of this to ourselves, right? I hope that I'm able to, exhibit the trait I want and not the trait I don't, because I'm filled with both.
Rabbi?
Or I know I'm prone to one, and I wish I were more prone to the other.
Rabbi, it's almost like something like God knows that Israel is going to transgress, that Israel has transgressed and will transgress again. And it's almost like we go to visit someone that we know has done something wrong or said something wrong and is still going to do that. And please don't let me do anything wrong. Like God is saying it to himself, like we say it Oh, please let me keep my anger in check. Don't let me lose my cool.
Right. Then this is like this. So many very good. So many relationships like this, right? Like you can do it in. I mean, like parenting is like a given on it, right? Like I know that like yelling isn't going to get the room clean or whatever it is, right? Like it's not like whatever it can be, or in any relationship, like fighting over this isn't going to solve anything. Like,
or someone who thinks in a different way than you do politically, and you know that there's going to be a Brigus.
Exactly. Forwarding this article isn't going to convince them.
Right.
Oh, they're using human shields, and it's not going to happen. Like yeah. So all of this, like and it's and this is God doing it too. And also, by the way, what this prayer, putting this prayer in God's mouth, as it were, also spins Jewish history differently. They're living in the aftermath of the destruction of the temple and the exile from the Holy Land. And notice that they have God, again, as it were, up there in heaven being like, yeah, I really wish I didn't act like that. I like sometimes they just get to me. But I wish I could. I wish I could approach this differently, and in the future, I hope I approach this stuff differently. It's this amazing thing.
Maybe you could extend that by, I wish I could rule by love rather than fear.
Yeah. I mean, that's sort of what it is. It's like, may my mercy overcome my anger, or be greater than my anger, and then and it's going to go on, and like there's like more to the prayer, but it's all in the same vein, and it's all sort of that. Like and this is, I mean, if you think of if the theology is God's in control of the world, and what happens is because God thinks it's the right thing to happen, then adding this into the mix seems to like make it less bad. God has different attributes, like we all do. There's anger, there's mercy, there's other things, and they're not always perfectly balanced. And this is the other thing. Not only is God not omniscient, know the future, or omnipotent, sort of like perfectly in control, because then you wouldn't pray if those things weren't the case. But there's also a imperfect aspect to it, right?
Does that give us sort of permission to do things unconsciously wrong, as long as we rethink them and try to do it better next time?
Well, I mean, that's how we're programmed anyway, right? Like that's the you're not supposed to, like, not the purposeful overlooking, but it seems to be saying that the world is such that part of it is that you're going to do things that you regret, or want to be different than you are.
Rabbi, I noticed something very interesting. 3 times in this paragraph, he refers to his children Israel, as if there are no other people in the world.
Well, notice that the Israel in each instance is inserted by the modern editor. So we can talk about that, but it's not, but that's not in the bold print is the translation of the Hebrew, and the lighter face, the standard print, is the modern insertion. So I think it's realistic that they that the original is thinking of Israel, but it's a but that's not there in the text. For the rabbis, I wouldn't go so far as to say that there are no other people in the world. As with like there are a couple of things. One, there's a sense of a special relationship. Two, there's a sense of like, just because God has a relationship with Israel doesn't mean there's not a relationship with other people. Quite the contrary, there is a relationship with other people, but our focus is this. And they have a and they also feel like, you know, like Israel has like sort of a uniquely difficult time of it. And if Israel is doing okay and at peace and, you know, not being sort of knocked around, then that's likely true for others as well. That when there's peace here, sort of indicative of peace elsewhere, because we seem to be the last in line for it. There are other social movements today that take a similar aspect, that, you know, like that you can by singling out one group, it doesn't mean that nobody else is important. It means that it's uniquely difficult for the one group.
Now, tying this into our very first class in this course, what time do you think God says the Shema if he prays?
That's a good question, right? Like, exactly. Well, like when is this said? Right. The when exactly the so fascinating piece. This goes on, and it goes on in this vein. So is the 20th. So we'll pick up here next time, but it's incredibly fascinating because it seems to violate sort of like basic principles of monotheism and religion and like sort of everything one believes about God. But this sort of dealing with anger and the problem of God's anger is so important, that they're doing this stuff that feels so borderline heretical, but here they're just, yeah, God praise. So we'll pick up here next time, but this is like a uniquely incredible section, I think.
All right. Could I just, let me just throw this out before I forget, and then we can pick it up next time. Just when he says, God says, may it be their will that my mercy will overcome my anger towards Israel for their transgressions. It seems to imply perhaps he's either praying in advance to think that he might have his anger overcome his mercy, or perhaps if it's happened in the past, to me, it perhaps implies that that's happened already, and he's hoping or praying to himself that it won't happen again. So my question is, when they say, to whom does God pray and what does he say? Does he ever repent, a la Yom Kippur, and to whom? Who is he asking forgiveness from? Does he ever ask, because he's now praying for his mercy to overcome his anger, but does he have regrets, and does that ever get mentioned anywhere? And does he pray for forgiveness to himself?
Yes, I think after the flood, didn't God say that he would never do that again?
Yeah. So God regrets making humanity before the flood, and then regrets bringing the flood afterwards. So like that definitely is there in the talk. But here, when Joe, you say that, it triggered like in my head like that. I mean, the Yom Kippur comparison is that, like, you know, in Yom Kippur, to apologize, to make amends with somebody, you have to try and undo what you did. So part of this is almost like, if they're setting up God for that Yom Kippur moment, then the way you repent of having acted too angrily is to undo the effects of your anger, right? So that's sort of like, since you're now, you know, in exile and at the bottom of the you know, human chain, you know, as the lowliest of the people, the way that God would have to repent of that is to reverse the status, right? So the you'll see how this plays out, because it'll continue in this vein for a little while. But it does imply that if God did something worthy of regret, then the system is God is obligated then to seek to make amends for that.
Okay. That's the teaser. Teaser for next time.
All right. But incredible. I obviously love this section. I feel like many people do. All right.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.